All right. I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us today. I want to thank you for joining Together We Grow for part 2 in our summer series. Today we are focusing in on future trends and innovations in higher education. I'm Kristin Kirkpatrick, the Executive Director for Together We Grow, an industry consortium of modern food and agriculture companies, NGOs, members of academia, and the government, working together to address the monumental challenge of feeding a rapidly growing global population while using fewer resources. The consortium sponsors strategic initiatives focused on creating a more skilled, diverse, and inclusive talent pipeline for agriculture in the United States. A few housekeeping notes. If you could please place your settings on speaker view, you'll see how to do that in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If you could put yourself on mute, that would also be delightful. And if you have questions during the discussion, please add them in the chat and we'll try to weave them into our discussion at the end of this conversation as time allows. I am delighted, absolutely delighted, to be joined by the 5 incredible panelists that we have here, representing 5 amazing organizations. Today, you will be hearing from Ebony Weber, who's the Chief Operating Officer at MANRRS, Dr. Tony Allen, the President of Delaware State University, Dr. Cathy Sutphin, the Associate Director at Virginia Cooperative Extension, Dr. Pamala Morris, the Assistant Dean at Purdue University, and Dr. Ben West, Director of Strategic Partnerships at the University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture. These past 5 months, our colleges and universities have been sprinting to innovate and have been adapting to 2 new realities. And I want to pause to take a moment to acknowledge how much work the faculty, staff, and teachers in this country have been putting in to meet the needs of our students, and to say thank you. There is, of course, the pandemic related to the coronavirus, which has accelerated digital transformation and necessitated new methods of engagement. In addition, our universities are in a unique space to both lead and respond to the nation's reckoning with racism and social justice. With those 2 challenges as the backdrop for this conversation, I'm going to lead a conversation with our panelists one at a time, and then later in this hour, we will engage in a broader discussion. So Ebony, I'm going to start with you. Ebony leads an incredible organization, MANRRS, which stands for Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences. And I'm eager to hear your perspective, Ebony, about the future of higher education, since MANRRS has chapters at 55 various colleges and universities throughout the US. Can you tell us a bit more about the work you do and the future you are building alongside so many colleges and universities throughout the nation?
Yes, thank you so much, and good afternoon to all my esteemed colleagues. I'm happy to see many of you and a lot of names I recognize. So again, thank you all for having me. And for those that are familiar with MANRRS, as Kristin mentioned, we do have chapters and programs at 55 universities and colleges across the country, encompassing all different types of institutions, both 1890, 1862, as well as some Hispanic serving institutions. And part of our mission has been to really listen and speak to our student members. Our organization is primarily student driven. We have over 2,000 active members, and the large majority of those are collegiate students, both graduate and undergraduates. Our board also encompasses 18 student officers. So we get a lot of student input and insight into our programs and how best to connect with them. And one of the things that we're really hearing from students that they would like at least the role that MANRRS could play. And I may not be able to speak what the future of higher education would be, just because I think it's still so much that's unknown in that space, but definitely the role that MANRRS seeks to play alongside our university partners is how can we be continuing the development of our student members. We know that a lot of our industry partners are going to be looking for new ways to connect with students, being that many of them won't be able to travel to a lot of campuses. And so using MANRRS as a vehicle, those connections with students so that they can continue to build out that network into these real career pathways. I think the other piece that we're hearing from our students too is around just mental and emotional health and just wanting that sense of community and support. And so we are looking at a number of ways with our regional VPs to engage with students both on a learning and development aspect, but also just social. So looking at some fun ways to connect with students and really to continue to hammer on our value proposition of that network and community. And then the last piece is, I know Dr. Morris, I loved how she framed it up in our previous discussion about facing these two pandemics, is in the age of racial injustice, is really serving as a platform and a voice for our members to elevate their experiences, to be part of the solutions that are being put forth in a lot of colleges of ag. And so we hope to partner and work alongside of them to elevate in those three areas.
I love that, Ebony, and I think that social emotional component is so crucial, and a heavy lift that I think everybody is carrying right now. We're going to tease some of that out a little bit later. At this time, I'm going to switch to Dr. Allen. Dr. Allen, you took the helm as the president of Delaware State University earlier this year with a bold vision of making Delaware State University the most diverse contemporary HBCU or historically Black college and university in America. Even before your current role, however, you have been innovating the role of a university in both the lives of students and communities and building creative partnerships. I would love if you could tell us more about your vision for the future of higher education, HBCUs in particular, and how you've built successful partnerships with the private sector.
Thank you, Kristin, and hello to all my colleagues. Please feel free to call me Tony. I was in banking for about 15 years. And my Ph.D. literally meant nothing in that discipline. So I'm used to being called Tony. Happy to be here with everybody. And I do want to take just one moment to reflect on what I know to be the obvious today. We've obviously lost civil rights icon and Congressman John Lewis, and in CT Vivian, who was funeral services were last week. Congressman Lewis are today. And what I believe has happened over this last 6 months relates to those two pandemics, but it's also created a unique opportunity for us. From my perspective, and I know we're from all over the country, from my perspective, what I'm seeing today around civil unrest and continued persistence on many fronts around equity and racial justice is much more multiracial than I have ever experienced in my lifetime, and much more sustained than I have ever experienced in my lifetime. And that, to me, that sends a good message about who we are as a country and where we're going. Relative to Delaware State University, you're right, I started on January 1st, 60 days later. I was in the middle of COVID-19. 60 days after that, there was the murder of George Floyd. And I can tell you quite honestly, I don't want to be any place else at any other time. The fact that I am at Delaware State University is certainly a career aspiration, but it's become a little bit more of a life's passion now, because if there was any other time for an HBCU to really show its relevance, it is really now. And I'll give you a sense of what we've done during the pandemic and how we're moving forward. So when it happened for us, we obviously went virtual for the rest of the semester, sent all but 200 of our students home. Those 200 that were remaining, 100 of them, think of them as otherwise homeless, literally. And the remaining 100 from very vulnerable communities. So we took the time to understand their situations, kept them on campus, and gave them the care and concern that they needed. And I really thought, quite frankly, I was going to focus there for the spring semester, but it became evident to me that our students at home were also struggling. Two stories quickly. One student, both grandparents died of COVID, and she was the only remaining family member and had to bury her grandparents without any resources. Second, young man, or actually our student government president, mother died of COVID. So graduating senior, preparing for graduation, immediately became father to his two younger siblings and a breadwinner. And I thought about that and the kids I had on campus, and we really went about the business of engaging our corporate partners in the reality of what was happening at our institution. We raised about $1.5 million in 2 months to get real resources to our students. And it really showed the value to me of why organizations that work with predominantly first-generation college students and largely Black and Brown students is very relevant. In addition to the excellence in education, it's really about the quality of care we're able to provide. The second thing I'd say is we were really challenged by our students when the murder of George Floyd happened. And they challenged us on 2 fronts. One, they wanted us to show up. So I actually spent time at about 4 or 5 protests supporting my students in their various communities. And the second thing they wanted us to do was show up and shut up. It was really clear to them that it was time for them to take much more of a leadership position. I'll remind everybody on this phone that John Lewis, when he gave his part of the speech on the March on Washington, was 23 years old. And it gave me an opportunity to think more deliberately about how we should be listening to our students, particularly those who are Black and Brown and from disadvantaged situations. Finally, I'd say with respect to corporate partnerships, not surprisingly, I have been asked to speak to about 15 different corporations since June. And I know many of you, particularly those who represent the African American and Latino communities, you kind of get this call in these moments. And usually it's because some people are having quote unquote courageous conversations and they need the Black leader or the Latino leader to come in and try to set the table. What I've tried to do is say a couple of things in each of those sessions. One, a courageous conversation is not enough. 2, when we return back to normal, whatever normal looks like, you need to remember that the diverse talent pipeline is really at historically Black colleges and universities and other minority serving institutions. So you got to put some real action behind the words. And 3, as we go forward together, having meaningful connections across all of our institutions, regardless of our makeup, becomes critically important how our corporate partners think of us. I know that I'm actually a graduate of University of Delaware, which is the big sister institution up the street. And even as I'm the president of Delaware State, I often get what I think is unfairly compared to the big sister institution that's serving a completely different set of students. In my humble opinion, can't do what we do relative to the students we serve. But we still have the challenge around helping corporate America with diverse talent pipelines. So I've tried to talk real truth to power in these moments, which I think really belies what I believe the future of higher education is. We will not be a more perfect union if we cannot provide access and quality higher education to all. And that has to be as important at Delaware State University as it is as any major institution in this country. So I do believe that that's the pandemics with an S have taught us something on both fronts. And now it's up to us to try to figure out how to sustain the discussion and really build positive linkages, which is why I'm such a believer in Together We Grow. Sorry for being long-winded, Kristin, but that's my view.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing and so powerful. There are so many things I want to tease out there. And thank you also for grounding us in what's happening today with Representative Lewis and his funeral and giving us that history and perspective as well, Tony. I really appreciate it. We're going to tease some of that out for sure in our conversation. But right now I want to pivot to Dr. Sutphin from Virginia Cooperative Extension. And Virginia Cooperative Extension has a unique model. And Cathy, I would love if you could tell us, you're involved in pretty much every program related to youth and agriculture in the state of Virginia. And building off of something that Tony just was talking about, as you work to help more students see their futures in agriculture, can you tell us about how you're connecting with your faculty and staff to prepare them to build cultures of inclusion?
Thank you so much, Kristin. I really appreciate the introduction, and I'm not sure that I'm totally connected to every program, but I do try to get my hands in a lot of things. Virginia Cooperative Extension is really glad to be part of Together We Grow, and we really look forward to learning from each of you because I think there's work to be done on all of our behalf, and together is how it's going to happen. Kristin mentioned that Virginia Cooperative Extension has a unique model, and I really do believe that for a couple of reasons. First, unlike most southern states, Virginia Cooperative Extension operates as one extension system that includes both of our land-grant universities, Virginia Tech and Virginia State Universities. And in doing that, we hire extension specialists at both institutions, but those specialists work with and through one set of extension agents across the state. So those extension agents then have the opportunity to tap into the resources and expertise that are unique at both of our land-grant institutions. Secondly, I think we are unique in that Virginia Cooperative Extension encompasses not only the 4-H program, which is the traditional program of extension, but we also engage and oversee the FFA program in our state. So this gives us a unique opportunity to impact change and initiate new programs across agricultural programming in both 4-H and FFA. And then lastly, our administrative structure in Virginia and the vision of our administrators really tend to enforce and encourage the development of partnerships and collaborations, both internal to the universities, but also external with various groups and industry partners. And that enables us to change and pivot more quickly and address issues as they come up. With that being said, I'd like to share a couple of initiatives that I think are helping us to create positive change and hopefully shifting culture in our college and in extension and ultimately in the communities across Virginia. Our college actually started a diversity council back, I think, in 2005. And their efforts have been to try to increase recruitment and retention of a diverse faculty, staff, and student population. And they've really done very well in that regard, but they've also really worked hard to create awareness as faculty, student groups, whoever brought issues forward, they would bring those to administration, but they would also create professional development opportunities, brown bag lunches, bring lectures in. And so that's kind of started creating the culture in our college, which has let us in extension create some new and unique programs. So the second one I'd like to share with you is called the Extension Diversity Fellows Program. We're finishing our second cohort. We have recruited 12 faculty members from across the state in each cohort. And those groups get together and have extensive training in diversity and inclusion, and then go back into the districts where they work, and they provide support and professional development for their colleagues, faculty and staff in the districts. And that has allowed us to have some system-wide discussions and professional development. Some examples are LGBTQ training. We also participated in identification of personal privilege and what those are, recognizing them and how they might impact how we work together, but also how we work with community members across the state. So our diversity fellows have become our champions for diversity and inclusion, and they're often the ones that people go to when they're feeling uncomfortable or they feel the need for additional training. And so that's strengthening the capacity of our system. Another program that really was timely this year. We actually started planning for it about 1.5 years ago. It's a program called Coming Together for Racial Understanding, and several of our land grants are probably familiar with this. But we recruited a faculty team and sent them to national training. And they came back and started strategizing about how we could implement the program in the state. And then, of course, with all the unrest that's going on now, it was so timely that we had a discussion about, well, perhaps we need to have those discussions internally as an organization. And so our team formulated a process by which our entire extension system was able to come together and have small breakout working sessions around racial understanding, and having being able to share our own personal experiences in a comfortable setting and learn from each other. It's really improved the trust within our system and our willingness to work together to address issues within our own organization. But then also, ultimately, we hope to have our faculty comfortable and have the skills to lead similar discussions in their communities all across the state. So we're really excited about that program and anxious to see how that plays out in the coming months and years. Lastly, I'd like to share an initiative. Ebony, you'll be happy about this. We're trying to start in Virginia called the Junior MANRRS Initiative. And again, it's a partnership. We do a lot of stuff in partnership, but this is a partnership with our University College Access Collaborative and our MANRRS chapters at Virginia Tech and Virginia State Universities. And what we're trying to do is figure out a way to engage middle and high school students and get them interested in agriculture and natural resources, and get them interested early so that we can help retain them through the 4-H and FFA programs and our Junior MANRRS chapters, and hopefully create a pipeline not only for higher education, but also for the ag industry in the future. So to get that kicked off, we've started doing professional development with our extension agents and our ag teachers in the state. We've held a Junior MANRRS Leadership Institute for sophomores and juniors in high school. And this summer we have an intern whose sole job description is to lay the groundwork and create the partnerships at the local level to establish our first chapter. So in conclusion, I would say to affect change and really change the culture, we have to invest in a variety of avenues across partnerships and across time. And so I'm very encouraged by such a large group of people coming together to do that, and together we grow. Thank you.
Dr. Sutphin, thank you so much. I'm always so impressed by the systemic nature in which you guys are tackling things and the way that you all work together. I'm always very inspired by the partnership and collaboration that you have. I think that tees us up really well to transition now to Dr. Pamala Morris. And Dr. Morris, you have been at this work being a leader in building diversity and inclusion for colleges of agriculture, inspiring work across the country and doing phenomenal work at Purdue. And as our country grapples with institutionalized racism, I would love if you could tell us more about what you think the future of agriculture looks like, particularly as it relates to social justice issues, Black Lives Matters, and the anti-racist work that our institutions are all engaging in at different parts in the journey. Some of us are newer at this, and some of us, like you, Dr. Morris, have been fighting the good fight for a while. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Kristin. And can everyone hear me? Can you hear me clearly? Okay, good. Thank you, Kristin. And thank you to my esteemed colleagues who are on the panel and who have joined us for the conversation this afternoon. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share. Yes, I have been in this fight for a long time. And as one of my colleagues says all the time, it's an exciting time to be in agriculture, and it is an exciting time. However, we do have some challenges, and we can, I think, together, we can grow together as we speak about the initiative that has brought us together today. Together we grow. And in respecting and remembering John Lewis, I think he said, if you see something, do something. And so with that regard, I'd like to say that our College of Agriculture, Purdue, I think has been trying to be very proactive rather than reactive. At times we have to be reactive. With COVID-19 coming upon us suddenly, surprisingly, nothing we expected. And then of course with our pandemic that has been endemic to our nation for 400 years, the racial injustice that we are experiencing and have experienced over the last years, there is an urgency. There's an urgency for us to continue to work together to make a difference in campuses across this country and in the agricultural industry. So I want to talk a little bit about how we have been proactive. So back in 2004, we were having some conversations with industry representatives, and what they were telling us is that, wow, not only Purdue, but colleges and schools across agriculture were graduating predominantly white male students. They were coming into the industry, and they weren't prepared to work with people who looked different from them, who talked different from them, who had different ideas, different perspectives. So what can we do about this? And so what we decided to do is that we needed to be proactive. We were being reactive, but actually being proactive to establish or initiate a course to be part of our core curriculum. And so we have a requirement, our multicultural understanding requirement, where undergraduate students have to have 3 credit hours in multicultural understanding before they can graduate, so that we can better prepare them to go out and be competitive in the global marketplace. And so we began that initiative. It was approved by the faculty. We began that initiative back in 2006, offered a course that I still teach, our diversity and social justice course, in the spring of 2007. And we have been offering that course ever since. And that was one way that we thought that we could prepare our undergraduate students to begin to have these difficult conversations that we needed to have relative to the social issues that we are confronted with living in our country. So that's just one initiative. And so we have had that course is ongoing. And I just found out this morning that all of a sudden there was a mistake made somewhere, and they have me registered for 3 courses. And students are registered for courses. So I'm really confronted with our challenge with trying to figure out what I'm going to do with these 3 courses on my watch. Okay, so that's one of the things that we have been doing. In addition to that, in reference to what Ebony has been talking about, our MANRRS organization, I am the primary advisor for MANRRS, for our MANRRS Purdue chapter. And so we have been working with students in that MANRRS chapter, because one thing that we know is that our BIPOC population, and that is a new acronym for many of us, and that stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. Our BIPOC population has to have a place where they can feel nurtured, where they can be supported, and where they can feel that they can gain access to resources. And so our MANRRS organization serves our BIPOC population within our college and throughout the sciences across campus, because it's not just students in agriculture, but also in the related sciences who are members of our MANRRS chapter. We do have 3 junior MANRRS chapters that we're working with. These are high school students who we are preparing to come into our college to be successful students. And so we do have 3 MANRRS chapters, and I know my colleague who spoke before me talked about developing MANRRS chapters. So those are some of the things that we're working on. But I do want to tell you, in response to COVID and the racial unrest, we are beginning to do some things differently, because I think we have to reimagine the way that we do things. Our college is moving in a direction of inclusive excellence. So what we're doing is focusing on making our already excellence that exists in our college across all of our mission areas more inclusive by embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion in everything that we do. We'll be looking at our policies and our practices, our teaching, our research. It will span across everything and at every level within our. We're excited about that. But in relation to also what we're doing, listening, because we've had a lot of our grad students speak out recently about the racial unrest, and so how are we responding to that? We are having coming together for racial understanding conversations. We had our first one probably about 4 weeks ago. We had 140 participants. So we know there's a need to have these conversations. These conversations are extremely important. They've always been important, but there's an urgency now. So we had 140 people to participate, where they explored identities, their experiences, and shared their stories, their individual stories. Our Center for Plant Biology is working with our office to create a series of workshops relative to developing how to become an anti-racist. So they're using Ibram X. Kendi's latest book on how to be an anti-racist, and they will be discussing that book over a series of workshops throughout the next semester. One thing that I think is really interesting is that we are developing talking circles. These are just, I'm just so excited about this. Our first talking circle was held probably 2 weeks ago, and that was just for the BIPOC people within our college. Grad students, faculty, and staff joined in. There were probably more than 50 people that were part of that conversation. Now, with that said, there were some, even our dean wanted to be part of this discussion, but we even had the dean that she couldn't be part of the discussion because it was just for the BIPOC population. So just yesterday, we created a space to another talking circle that we call White Allies and Accomplices. And I'm so proud and excited to say that we had over 100 people as part of that talking circle. So we are really doing some things. People are exploring and really, I think, coming into an awareness that there's an urgency to what we have to start doing, because students, as we've heard from our grad students, they want action. We have been giving lip service to people and people of color about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We talk a lot about this, but what have we really done to change things? And so things are going to have to change. I have some ideas that I'd like to talk about and share with you a little bit later. But in addition to the talking circles, I do want to say that we have created, one thing that we know is that we have to be transparent and we have to communicate. So there has to be clear, effective communication, and with that, transparency. And so as a result of our discussions with our grad students, we have developed a new newsletter, and we're calling that championing change. And so that in itself, hopefully, sends a message that we're ready to change things and we're ready to reimagine how we are performing, how we are taking action, what we need to be doing in order to create a sense of belonging for everybody who is a part of our college. And so with that said, I've got other other ideas that I want to share, but I'll wait until we're ready for that.
Dr. Morris, that's amazing. You guys have so much going on, and you're evolving so quickly. And I know that you're doing it with so much thought and conversation and good intention. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to transition us to our last panelist now, to Dr. West. And Dr. West, you guys have been leading some really interesting work at the University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, rethinking how you're engaging youth in the K-12 setting. You are also now piloting new pathways into ag for veterans. And I'm hoping that you can tell us more about the work you've been doing and ideas for how we can continue to reach audiences in agriculture that we haven't always been good at reaching in the past.
Yeah, thank you. And good afternoon, Kristin and everyone. It's a real honor to be part of this group, both with my panelists, fellow panelists, and everyone else joining. At the Institute of Agriculture at UT, which is our comprehensive ag unit, includes our academic units in ag and in veterinary medicine, extension, and research. I'm involved in trying to advance special projects that have particular significance for us through partnerships and through strategic approaches. And I often think about the grand challenge that we all share. And I think about it almost daily, that we have this challenge of feeding an extra 2 billion people in 30 years. But as I tell people, that's just half the challenge. We also have to do that in a way that fosters environmental health and economic health and community health and individual human health. To do that, I mean, it is a massive challenge. It's going to involve a lot of things. One of the things that is going to be absolutely paramount is to recruit a broader, more diverse pipeline of people into our fields. We all know that. We all believe that. That's the foundation of Together We Grow. One of the things I've realized is it's not enough just to know it and to believe it, or even to invest resources in it. We've got to think and understand the realities about the barriers and the opportunities to connect to a broader, more diverse population, and then develop strategies and approaches and initiatives to overcome the barriers and take advantage of the opportunities. I've been real fortunate at UT to be involved in 2 projects that we think are a piece of that. And I'll share just briefly about those 2. One was the creation of a new 4-H center in Tennessee. When I spent 10 years as an academic extension specialist and then into administration with extension when I came to Tennessee, and have been involved in creation of a new 4-H center. We had a 4-H center that closed, and we were challenged and charged with creating a new 4-H center. 4-H, like I suspect in many of your states, in Tennessee is a very robust, strong program. We have 180,000 kids across Tennessee in 4-H, which sounds impressive, but that's only 12% of the potential population. There are huge swaths of youth that are not connected to 4-H in any way. So as we were started to think about how to create a new center to serve our 4-H audiences, we also thought, what can we do at this new place, which is going to require a lot of investment? How can we leverage this investment to reach new audiences that 4-H is not reaching? It has not reached well. And so to make a long story short, we acquired a new piece of property called Lone Oaks Farm. It strategically is close to Memphis, Tennessee, the 22nd or 23rd largest school district in the US, with a very diverse population. And we, about 3 years ago, launched the STEM education program there, where our goal is to help teachers advance their STEM education objectives in the classroom through hands-on learning experiences in agriculture and natural resources. What's interesting is when we market that program to teachers, we, for the most part, leave off that last part, agriculture and natural resources. We don't talk to them about ag and natural resources. We just say, we're going to give your kids hands-on experiences in STEM and the outdoors. Because one of the things that we've learned in talking to a lot of teachers in, for example, urban communities in Memphis, is just simply leading with the word agriculture can be a turnoff. We want to remove every barrier that we can. And so, and what we found is when we do that, and if you do that, everybody's interested. And one of the things we're most excited about our STEM education program, when you look at the kids and the schools that come there, it represents the diversity of the communities we serve. There are private schools, public schools, home schools. The diversity of the kids that come there almost perfectly match the diversity of the population, because we stopped trying to think about how do we convince them that agriculture is good, and we started thinking about how can we serve their needs and their challenges and their values, and agriculture just happens to be something that happens in the background that hopefully will open a door for deeper conversations in the future. So that's one example. The other example I'll just say quickly is a program that we've gotten a USDA grant for, pretty big one, to pilot a project to try and recruit a broader pipeline of veterans into agriculture. We started looking around at the veteran population, realizing that number one, it is a diverse population. They're coming, when veterans leave military service, they oftentimes leave service with some very highly developed technical skills, which is also in great need. And then we started looking at the programs that are out there now for veterans. And interestingly, there are a lot of programs for veterans. Every significant one that we've seen, there probably are some that don't meet this, but most of them are trying to recruit veterans to be small farmers. That's fantastic, but it doesn't meet the needs of serving farmers through our ag companies. And so we've just started this program where we're going to be trying to identify veterans that have particular technical skills and build an onboarding process and program to bring them into agriculture from an ag professional service perspective. And so Clay Summers, I think, is on the call. He's leading that program for us. That's just launching, but we're really excited about the future of that.
Dr. West, thank you so much. I am always delighted when we get to chat because you guys are doing such exciting work, and I think the innovation that you've shown and the reframing of how we offer the investments and the resources that we have is really intriguing as well. So we're going to transition now to the discussion section of our conversation, and if you have burning questions, please add them in our chat. But I'm going to start now to any of you who would like to start with answering this question. It has been incredible, and I am always in awe by how quickly each of you and your institutions have adapted to the remote world. I'd love if you could reflect on some of the challenges and opportunities that you see in the next couple of years as we continue to grapple with the effects of this pandemic and meeting the emotional needs of students, staff, and faculty as we tackle really sensitive topics that are hard to have in a remote context, like belonging, identity, and racism.
Wow, I'll jump in and go first. Then we definitely have had to pivot in a short amount of time in terms of moving from dismantling our conference in early April to having our first webinar in April at the end of the month. So we moved very quickly to making sure that we can answer the call to what students were feeling at the time, or what was the status of, internships. I think back in March, we all had this optimism that by the summer we were going to be back to normal, and that thing was a thing of the past. And here we are now with no end in sight for the foreseeable future. So one of the conversations that we've been definitely having with our partners and just internally is about what does the future of work look like. As you mentioned, I know with a lot of groups, some companies have now permanently sent their people at headquarters home indefinitely. Some may not ever go back. And so I think it, does, as Dr. Allen mentioned, present a unique opportunity for all of our institutions to play roles. I think it helps to elevate voices that were once quieter in the conversations. I think being on Zoom, it kind of helps to give everyone an equal access to speak up and to add their input into ideas. And then I would just add, because I definitely want to leave time for my other colleagues to speak, but also I love what Dr. Allen said in terms of students just want you to show up and shut up. And I would just add on to that, for us as MANRRS is set up as part of that, because we need to set up these platforms and opportunities to, and then get out of their way. And so we're just working. I think our, foreseeable future is really going to be, doing some landscape evaluations and just seeing what, making sure that we can keep a pulse on the needs of our students, of our university institutions, and just continuing to be agile enough to adapt to their change, because a lot of our programming is funneled through how the universities are set up. And so once they commit and decide what's going to work for them, then for us to really just come beside them and complement a lot of the work that they're doing.
Hey, Kristin, the only thing I'd add to what Ebony said, and it's not directly related to your question, but I think it's worth it, particularly for the companies that are on the phone. So my SGA, my newly minted SGA, met with me about 2 weeks ago and had 3 proposals for me to consider. The first was, could they paint Black Lives Matter somewhere on campus as a university-sponsored project, so all members of the university community who wanted to could participate. Second was, could they do some sort of socially distant barbecues with the university police on campus, which I thought was very, very interesting. And the third thing was, could we divest from Chick-fil-A because of their stance with respect to LGBTQ communities. And again, I was in the mode of show up and shut up. And when I did that, it actually helped me think through what's on their minds and what they are expecting from institutions where they feel like they have a voice, and probably what they're expecting from institutions that we are all connected with. So particularly for the companies that are on the call today, I'd pay I am doing it personally, but I'd pay very close attention to what these young, and I'd say activated, educated millennials are telling us about how they want to be heard and seen and what they find acceptable.
Absolutely.
Kristin, I would just add one thing. I think that this has given us an opportunity as an organization. Extension is known for working in communities and addressing needs of the community. This has given us a unique opportunity to step back and actually go back into the community and say, what are the needs right now? What can we help with right now? Which may or may not be the traditional programming we have been doing, but maybe something totally different. And so it's, in that regard, it's kind of exciting, but it also creates a lot of unique opportunities for partnerships. And if we can enter in partnerships together and not worry about who gets the credit, we can accomplish a lot of great change out there.
That's powerful. Does anybody else want to add to that before we move on? All right. I love the mantra, set up, show up, and shut up. That seems like a good mantra for all of us. Let's dive in for a few minutes about strategies. I know that you all have been able to highlight some of the things that you're doing that are proving to be effective, that are starting to shift cultures in the way that you're engaging in your universities. I'm curious what advice you have for others on this call who want to be more innovative with their partnerships or the way they're preparing students for the workforce. And if you have some tangible ideas that you are seeing work or that you would like to explore and think that collectively we might be able to have some impact with.
Tony, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Ben. We have a very good relationship with in our College of Agricultural Science and Technology with a lot of companies, but one most notably is FMC, which is a new relationship we have. In fact, we brought FMC to the Together We Grow table, and I think they're getting a lot of benefit out of it as a result. And we are just beginning the partnership, so it's an opportunity for us to think really clearly about how we want to engage. But one of the things I continue to pitch to them is the faculty/executive professional exchange, so, which I think has a lot of resonance for faculty support as well, which we don't always naturally think of when we go into these partnerships, but I think they have reverberating effects both ways. When we talk about contemporary instruction and what our students need based on what the industry is looking for, I think that helps set the table in a completely different way. So I'm looking forward to our expanding on that, but I would just offer that as one unique opportunity as we all build these corporate partnerships.
Kristin. Hi. Okay, I'd like to make a comment because I know that we don't have that many minutes left, but so I'd like to challenge my colleagues in the ag industry as well as campuses in higher ed, campuses across this country. I think we have a challenging question, and this may not fit for the question I think that you just asked, but I wanted to get this in there because I think we need to ask ourselves, you know, we do a lot of talking. We're having a great conversation right now, all kind of great ideas and strategies. But really, I think we need to ask the important question of how far are we willing to go to disrupt the structural racism on our campuses that are taking place on our campuses and in our workplaces. As I said earlier, we need to reimagine the way we do things, how we do things, why we do things. And I just read an article in the last 24 hours on from one of my former colleagues. The article was entitled, "Stop Playing Diversity Games with People of Color." And so, you know, we're doing a lot of talking, but, you know, as my colleague says in our article, that, you know, people of color, you know, this is our well-being depends on being able to do our work effectively, to be productive. And in order to be productive, we really do need to feel that sense of belonging. We do require a nurturing and supporting and a resourceful environment. And we shouldn't have to remind anyone that we deserve to be respected. We shouldn't have to remind people that we to respond to any concerns that we may express in a timely manner. We shouldn't have to remind people to investigate complaints or concerns about racism or any inequities that we're experiencing. And we shouldn't have to remind people to be accomplices. I didn't talk about that, but you know, we have allies. We talk a lot about allies, but we also need to be accomplices. And in being an accomplice, what you're doing is really putting your personal and professional self maybe in jeopardy of a lot of backlash because you're beginning to speak out and you're beginning to take action to help dismantle the structural racism that exists within our campuses and within the industry. So I just wanted to say that, but we really do need to ask ourselves that question. What are we willing to do to disrupt? Thank you.
Kristin, I've got one thing that kind of bridges your question and what Dr. Morris said. You know, one of my favorite leadership quotes is by a guy named Max Dupree, and he said, leadership, the first job of a leader is to define reality. I think many of the problems that we have are because we as a community in agriculture have just not been willing to accept the reality that exists around us. I said earlier that one of the things we've learned is that for many urban school teachers, the idea of agriculture, the brand of agriculture that we take so much pride in, is not just a neutral, it's actually a negative. And in many conversations I've had with people in agriculture, they don't want to believe it. And in some cases have refused to believe it. You know, it's something that's so important to all of us. How could someone not love agriculture? Well, until we understand and really accept that reality and lots of others, it's gonna be really hard to devise strategies to tackle these issues unless we understand with clear eyes what the challenges are.
I love that, Dr. West. I love that you added. I just wanted to say that. Thanks for sharing that.
These parting thoughts are so powerful. And for our final question, I want to focus in on that parting thought that you want to leave everybody with. Together We Grow does exist to focus on building a more skilled, diverse, and inclusive pipeline of talent for the ag industry in the US, so that we can meet those really big challenges that loom in the next few decades. In this particular moment in time, what is the biggest imperative for our NGOs and higher education institutions to advance that skilled, diverse, and inclusive workforce goal? And Dr. Morris, I think that you put it so beautifully. How uncomfortable are we willing to get? How much disruption do we want to push for? What is it that we need to do right now? And so I would love to hear your answers.
Well, I can have one thing to say: when we know better, we grow better. And so we all need to move toward becoming on that journey of becoming interculturally competent. And until we do that, until we see that it is everyone's responsibility, because I think at my institution, I think some people think, oh, that's her office's responsibility. That's her responsibility. If we're going to make a change and a sea change, it's all of our responsibilities to take this as an urgency and to make things happen. And so I would leave that as my final comment, that when we know better, we grow better.
Awesome. Well, just to echo from Dr. Morris's, from our standpoint, I can definitely, I guess, echo and say, if you're looking around and finding that there's something that you're not doing, then you're doing something wrong. So as we grow better, I think this is not the time to not do anything. In all of our organizations, there's work to be done to continue to diversify and make people and build out equitable programs. So continue to do the work. And again, if you're doing nothing, then that means that there's probably a lot more that needs to be done. And thank you all for having me this afternoon.
Kristin, I would just add that I think it's imperative that we reach beyond college and high school, all the way back to elementary and middle school, because that's when young people are starting to face those issues that we need to work with them and help them feel comfortable in having discussions, even at that early age, and also helping to guide them and provide role models for them. And MANRRS program, Ebony, provides excellent role models that we can connect with very young children to get them excited about the prospects of the agricultural industry and how they may play a part in it.
Ben, I think you're muted.
Yes, thank you. I promised I would not do that today. I was, I'll echo all those thoughts, and I often think about that famous quote by Einstein about, the same thinking that caused a problem will not be sufficient to solve problems. And I think in agriculture, we've got to be more innovative in this space and not let history and our own, professional cultural norms prevent us from being innovative and tackling the real problems that we all see.
I love that. Dr. Allen, Tony, do you want to close this out?
Hey, Kristin, I don't have anything profound to say because Dr. Morris says it all. So let me just say this. If you have not watched a TED Talk by Brian Stevenson, watch the TED Talk and remember his 4 pillars. Be approximate to things you're not close to today if you really want to do something about those things. Change the narrative, be hopeful, and never, ever give up. And I think if that is our mantra in every discipline, whether it's agriculture or politics, we have a unique opportunity to do better than the shoulders upon which we stand.
I mean, beautiful. You all exceeded my expectations, which were very high to begin with. Thank you for granting us an hour of your time to share the amazing work that you all are doing. And I know that I am not alone in feeling inspired by our conversation today. And we look forward to working with everybody to do the things that you have charged us to do, to look around, to do the work, to be more innovative, to not lose hope, to continue at it, and to know that it's the responsibility of all of us to advance this work and to do, not just to talk. So I look forward to seeing you all next month when we're going to roll up our sleeves and get diving in to the work that needs to happen. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.